So, have you ever felt this weird paradox? You work incredibly hard, you're climbing the ladder of success, but then you get to the top and the view just isn't what you expected. Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into why that happens and how a blueprint that's over 2,000 years old might just hold the key to a much more fulfilling life. I mean, this question really hits home for a lot of people, right? You land the promotion, you crush the sales target, you cross that finish line, and for a second, it feels amazing. But then, almost right away, that feeling just vanishes, and you're already hunting for the next prize. It's this relentless treadmill that can leave you wondering, am I even running in the right direction? And this really gets to the heart of the problem. So many of us have been taught to measure our lives with a kind of internal scorecard. It's this collection of job titles, salaries, accomplishments, all the things we use to prove our worth to ourselves and to the world. We're just constantly checking that score, hoping it all adds up to a life well lived. Okay, so here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to break down this modern happiness trap. Then we'll step back and ask what happiness actually is, with a little help from some ancient wisdom. From there, we'll look at a practical blueprint for virtue, see how it fits into our lives today, and finally explore a whole new way to light the path forward. All right, let's kick things off with part one, the modern happiness trap. We've really got to take a closer look at this game we're all playing, this constant and frankly often exhausting race for success. The economist Joseph Schumpeter just completely hit the nail on the head with this one. The money, the status, the power, they're not just rewards. For so many of us, they're points on the board. They're a real, tangible index of success that proves we're winning. The biggest problem, though, this is a game that never, ever ends. And, well, this is where our obsession with scorekeeping can get a little dark. According to one study, working all the time isn't always about ambition. Sometimes it's actually a way to self-medicate, a strategy to run away from feelings like anxiety and depression. We just bury ourselves in that scorecard so we don't have to look at what's really going on inside. So if chasing points on a scorecard is a trap, maybe the problem isn't how hard we're working. Maybe the problem is the goal itself. And that forces us to ask a really big question. What is happiness, really? Seriously, what if this whole idea we have of happiness, that it's some destination you arrive at through achievement, is just wrong? The good news is we are not the first people to wrestle with this. The ancient Greek philosophers pretty much dedicated their lives to this exact question, and their answer completely changes the game. Okay, I've got a new word for you, eudaimonia. It's pronounced eudaimonia. Now, Aristotle used this word, but he didn't mean that temporary feeling of pleasure you get from a good meal. He meant something much deeper, human flourishing. And here is the absolute key. It is not something you get. It is something you do. It's the activity of living a good and virtuous life. And when you put these two ideas side by side, the difference is just wow. Our modern idea of happiness, it's all external. It depends on getting things. Aristotle's idea, it's internal. It depends on your actions and your character. One is a destination you're trying to reach. The other is the way you travel. One is measured by a scorecard. The other is measured by the person you're becoming. Now, flourishing through virtuous activities sounds amazing, I get it, but it's also a little vague. Like, how do you actually do that? Well, that brings us to part three, a blueprint for virtue, and this is where it gets really practical. I mean, Aristotle makes it super clear right here in his own words. Happiness is an action verb. It's the sum of all your choices, your habits, your conduct. You don't just find happiness, you live it. You build it, moment by moment, with your actions in the world. So how do you act virtuously? Well, this is where Aristotle's genius really shines. He said virtue isn't about being perfect. It's about finding what he called a golden mean. He argued that every virtue is just the perfect balance point between two vices, one where you don't do enough and one where you do way too much. And finding that balance isn't something you're born with. It's a skill you have to practice, kind of like learning to play the guitar. Let's just take courage as an example, right? Courage isn't having zero fear. That's actually rashness, which is a vice of excess. And it's not being paralyzed by fear. That's cowardice, a vice of deficiency. Courage is the mean. It's feeling the right amount of fear for the situation and still acting the right way. And the same logic applies to all sorts of other virtues, like generosity, which is that sweet spot between being stingy and just being wasteful. Okay, so this framework is pretty elegant, but does a philosophy from 2,000 years ago really apply to our lives today? With our smartphones and remote work and everything else? Well, the answer is a huge yes, which brings us to part four. For Aristotle, this whole eudaimonia thing was not a solo project. He knew that we are fundamentally social animals. He basically argued that even if you had all the money and success in the world, a life without real, deep friendships would feel totally empty. Connection isn't some nice to have, it's absolutely necessary if you want to flourish. And get this, modern data totally backs him up. A full 70% of employees today say that friendship is the single most important part of a happy work life. Turns out, even in our careers, we're still just people who desperately need connection to thrive. So let's bring this all home. You can actually use this golden mean idea as a kind of diagnostic tool for your own life. Think about ambition. Is your ambition driven by vanity, the excess, or by a real desire to contribute something meaningful? Aristotle called that great-mindedness. Or what about conflict? Do you avoid it at all costs, or are you assertive when you need to be? This framework just gives us a whole new lens to look at our own actions. And that brings us to our final section, lighting the way forward. It's time to kind of reimagine our entire approach to a good life and really move on from that old broken model. And here it is, the ultimate takeaway. The answer isn't to just swap your old scorecard of money and status for a new virtue scorecard, no. The goal is to get out of the score-keeping business altogether, to stop measuring your life and to just start living it. You've got modern thinkers like Arthur C. Brooks who are doing fantastic work, bringing this ancient wisdom into the 21st century. And a big part of their argument is that we need to fundamentally change the metaphors we use for our own lives and our own progress. And that shift leads us to a new, and I think much more beautiful, metaphor. Now, this one comes from the Buddha, but it perfectly captures the spirit of eudaimonia. Instead of a scorecard, think of yourself as a light. Your purpose isn't to rack up points, but to illuminate, to make your own purpose clear, and to help light the way for others. And so that leaves us with one last question, a question to replace that old habit of always checking the score. What if, at the end of each day, instead of asking, how did I do or how did I score, you asked yourself, what light did I shine today? That one small shift in focus, well, it might just change everything.